ragazzi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you're watching this. Welcome back. Let's get a background. All right, there we go. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the processes in the IPO model. So remember, in the inputs, what we're doing is we're designing the team, thinking about who we want to include the team in some sort of the structure or the context in which the team is operating. The process is more how we manage the team. And I consider this analogy. If you've ever made ice cream, what are the necessary steps in order to make ice cream? Well, the first thing you do is you get something like vanilla, sugar, milk or cream, salt, ice usually. You get the ingredients, but you just don't put those ingredients in a bowl and then you have ice cream. In order to make ice cream, you gotta do something to those ingredients. You gotta put it in this machine and you gotta turn it and 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 turn it. Or these days you put it in a machine and press a button. But the point is that you take these ingredients and you have to massage them a lot before you can actually get ice cream. That's what the process is. In the inputs, we have our ingredients, we throw them in a bowl. In the process is what we're doing is we're taking those ingredients and we're churning them and churning them and churning them and churning them so that at the end we get ice cream or high performance. So, there are several processes. The processes are an area that you will probably have to manage and deal with over and over and over and over. This isn't a one-shot deal, like when we design the team, all right, we're picking these people, all right, we're kind of done with that, let's move on until we have to replace somebody. With the processes, you want to consider this stuff nonstop and think about how you're going to deal with this. There are several processes, and some of these processes will have their own video. I want to highlight in this video some of the processes that do not have their own independent video. So the first one I would like to talk about is what is known as group efficacy. And group efficacy is whether I think that my team is capable of accomplishing the task that is assigned to us, accomplishing the goal that is assigned to us. What we want is we want all our team members to have high group efficacy. That is, there's this collective feeling among our team that, yeah, we believe that we have the necessary skills, knowledge, and abilities, the necessary capabilities to accomplish the goal that is set out for us. Here's what we know. Teams, just like individuals, when they have a high sense of efficacy, a high belief that I am capable, I am able to accomplish the thing that is asked of me. When people have this internal belief, they tend to, first of all, set higher goals, and second of all, probably more importantly, they're more persistent when they're trying to reach those goals. The reason being, when they have setbacks, the inevitable setbacks that occur as we're trying to accomplish something, people that have high efficacy just say, all right, well, I got to try harder. I got to try a different way because in my mind, I believe that I actually can accomplish this. People that have low efficacy, teams that have low efficacy, when they have those inevitable setbacks, when things get a little bit difficult, they say in their mind, hey, I didn't think I could do this to begin with, so let's just stop trying. I mean, I just proved myself right. So the point is we want to have all our team members to have this feeling that as a group, we have high efficacy. Our group is capable of accomplishing these things that are set out in front of us. How do we build group efficacy? It's a good question. There's several ways that we can build efficacy. These kind of go as least potent to most potent, but I want to kind of just highlight how you can increase the efficacy of a team. The first is what we call verbal persuasion. And in verbal persuasion, all we're doing is giving the team encouragement. I believe that you can do this. I built this team. You're saying things like this. I built the team. I know the skills, knowledge, and ability. I know the task demands. You guys are capable. You are able to get this task done. You are able to reach this goal. The second way is what's called a vicarious experience. And a vicarious experience is when you see another team that's like your team succeed, you're more likely to believe that you can succeed. That is, when you see another group of people that doesn't appear to be any more talented than you are, when you see them perform a task, we're much more likely to believe that us as a team, our team, can actually perform that task also. And then the last way to build efficacy, which is the most powerful way, is what is known as the mastery model. And that is, once teams have a little bit of success, They start believing that they can accomplish things, so that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that they try harder, and it builds this efficacy. So what we can do as a leader and as a manager is encourage them. I believe that you guys can accomplish this. If it's appropriate, we make some comparisons to other groups. Hey, there's another group that accomplished this, and I believe that you're just as talented as they are. And then the last thing is we need to make sure we really celebrate successes and point out where they have succeeded. The other thing we want to work on is what's known as a transactive memory. And a transactive memory is just a fancy way of saying that teams are better off when I have a knowledge as a team member of all the various knowledge that all my team members have. Okay, now follow me. That doesn't mean that I have the same level of expertise as my fellow team members. What it means is I know what expertise they have. So if you are really good at accounting, I know that you're our accounting person. And if you're really good at public speaking, then I know that you're our public speaking person. And what's important here is that this transactive memory, this understanding of all the skills, knowledge, and ability that my fellow team members bring to the table. When us as a team, when we all have what's known as an accurate transactive memory. That is, what I think you actually know that material. The skill that I think you actually have that skill. When that is all in place, when my understanding of all that stuff is actually accurate, as a team, we just become a lot more fluid. We know very quickly where to assign roles. We know very quickly who to turn to when we have problems or when different tasks are assigned to us, because we know what skills, knowledge, and ability these people have. When we have an inaccurate transactive memory, what ends up happening is we assign people to the wrong roles, we assign tasks to the wrong people, and we're not maximizing the talent base that is in our team.
So I also want to talk a minute about
I also want to talk a minute about cohesiveness. And cohesiveness is the stickiness of the group. So we'd say a team is highly cohesive if they're all kind of on the same page. There's a high degree of norming, if you want to think of it that way. Most people think that you want a high degree of cohesiveness. That is, we're all together, we like being together, we gel, we stick together. Most people think that we want a high degree of cohesiveness. The reality is sometimes we want high cohesiveness, and there's other times when we don't want high cohesiveness. So the general rule of thumb is, if there is high performance norms, we want high cohesiveness. By high performance norms, what we mean is, on our team, there is an understanding that here are the things we do to exceed, to excel, to perform at a very high level. Things like we always make sure that we're on top of work. Things like we show up to meetings early, we stay on meetings until we are done. Things like we make sure that projects are done a day or two before so we can have one or two last looks at it to make sure we catch any mistakes that are possibly in our projects, okay? These would be things like high performance norms. In these situations, in teams that have these high performance norms, we want high cohesiveness. However, there are other teams that have low performance norms. These are things like, yeah, we're going to start our meetings 10 minutes after, and we're going to try to get out as soon as possible. Yeah, our goal in this team really is just not to get fired. Yeah, we're going to get this done, but we're kind of 11th hour sort of workers. It's due at 8 o'clock. We'll make sure it's done at 7:30. Okay, those are low performance norms. In those teams, you actually do not want high cohesiveness. Because if there's low cohesiveness, that means at least one person in that group says, I'm not on board with this. This idea that we're going to show up late and leave early, I don't know. And when one person's not on board, then there's the potential that you can change and develop some high performance norms. But when there's high cohesiveness and low performance norms, that team is kind of sunk. It's very hard to change it. So if we do have high performance norms in place and we want to increase the cohesiveness, there are some ways that we can do this. One thing which is simple is the more time teams members spend together, they tend to be more cohesive. This isn't always true, but it's something called the mere exposure effect. The more we're exposed to things over time, we tend to develop a greater affinity for them. Really silly case in point, pretty much every bad pop song you've ever heard, and you think, I can't stand that song, and then Every cafe that you go to, it's blaring the song, and then next thing you know, you're driving in your car and you're singing the song. Okay, that would be an example of just being exposed to stuff more. Sometimes we have a tendency to like it. Not always the case, okay, but sometimes that occurs. Things like physically isolating the team, that increases cohesiveness. And I'm not saying like you take the team and put them on an island, but things like the way we arrange our work settings. So we could arrange our cubicles so everyone has their own cubicle, or we could arrange our cubicles so that teams of 4 sit together in one big cubicle. That would be a form of physical isolation. Oftentimes in colleges of business, the floors in the college will be separated by departments. First floor is finance, second floor is accounting, third floor is strategy, fourth floor is management. So that is a form of physical isolating. And again, the idea is to build cohesiveness. In general, the smaller groups are, the more cohesive they tend to be. And another thing we can do to increase cohesiveness is to reward the group as a whole. So offer group rewards, not individual rewards. Now, use that one with caution. If you do that, you're setting yourself up for social loafing. We'll have a whole nother video on social loafing, but just be aware you're setting yourself up if you just reward the group. The other thing we can do to increase cohesiveness is to encourage the team members to agree upon goals. That's part of the reason in that initial, you have a goal in your mind, then you bring the people in, and you say, here's kind of what I want to do. What do you guys think we should do? Well, by having that discussion, they have inputs in the goal, and there's something about having everyone kind of agree upon the goal that we're going towards and being part of that discussion that increases the cohesiveness of the group. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about in the processes part is communication patterns. There's a couple things we can do with communication that will help teams succeed and be more efficient. One thing is I think very early on, especially in this day and age, you should have very direct conversations with your team members about what is their preferred mode of conversation. Some people prefer text, some people prefer email, some people prefer phone calls, but I think it's better to get an understanding up front about here's what we as individuals kind of prefer and how we're going to communicate. Another thing I would suggest is you use channels of communication appropriately. Let me explain. Think about when you are talking to one of your team members, usually you have one of two reasons why you're having a conversation with them. Number one, I need to share some information with you. Or number two, we need to have some sort of discussion so that we can come to some mutual understanding about something. We have to make a decision about something, okay? Number one, we're having a meeting on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Okay. Number two, how do you think we should approach the client discussion? Okay. Do you guys understand the subtle difference? One is I'm just conveying information. The other one, we have to converge and come together and have mutual understanding and develop new meaning or make decisions. Okay. Now, there's an idea, it's called the media synchronicity theory. That is not what it's called. Media synchronicity theory is what it's called. And the idea behind this theory is that it is important to match the message with the channel of communication. Now, channels of communication can range from lean, which would be things like text, right? We can't read nonverbals. There's a delay in response versus very rich, which would be face-to-face. It's immediate. We get feedback immediately from the other person. We can read nonverbals. We can read intonations in the voice. We can pick up on emotions a lot easier. So the idea is this, that when we need to have a conveyance message, that is, I just need to tell you something, message number one, actually our leaner channels of communication tend to be a little bit better. That is, things like a text, things like an email. But when we need to have a convergence discussion, we need to come together and make a decision. We need to come together and develop new meaning. Then it is almost always necessary to use richer channels of communication. face-to-face, video conferencing, phone conferencing, letter writing, I don't know, something else, okay? But the point is that we don't need to have these face-to-face conversations when you're just telling me something. It's actually a waste of all of our times. But if we need to develop a meeting, we need to exchange thoughts back and forth, the leaner channels of communication, the text, the email, it's just not effective because things go tangential, emotions aren't understood. I'll talk more about this in the conflict, but it's just not a good way to go. There's a number of studies done a couple of years ago that looked at the patterns of communication among high-performing teams. And I want to highlight just a couple of these findings. The findings were something like this. Number one, not one team member spoke disproportionately in team meetings. That is, in high-performing teams, when they had a meeting, pretty much everyone spoke in roughly equal amounts of time. There wasn't one person that in an hour meeting spoke 45 minutes. If there's 4 people, they each spoke about 15 minutes. But, number 2 in this, these team members in these team meetings, they not only just spoke roughly equal amounts, but they also spoke in relatively short sentences, relatively short statements. That is, I'm going to say what I need to say, I'm going to say it with some passion, some enthusiasm to get my point across, and then I'm going to sit back and let other people talk. So even though each person spoke about 15 minutes, it wasn't that they were speaking 15 minutes in one block, a minute here, 2 minutes there, 5 minutes there, a minute there, okay? That's the way the high-performing teams are trying to patterns of communication happen in meetings. The other thing that one of these studies found was that high-performing teams also had a lot of informal meetings, one-on-one among the team members, outside of official teams. So they were doing things like when they saw each other in the hall, they were checking up. They would do things like if they had an immediate question, they'd just run to somebody's office and check in with them rather than waiting for the team meeting. And not only that, they would have a lot of discussions about their team projects with members that were not part of their team. That is, they would discuss issues with other team members. Things like, hey, we're working on this project and we're kind of bogged down on this one little point. Did you guys ever face anything like this in your team? How did you deal with this? And that gave them strategies for how to fix problems within their own team. Not personnel problems. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about project problems, okay, work problems, strategies for how to deal with work issues. Okay, so there's 3 other things.
4 other big things.
4 other big things in this process section, and that is, there's a few other things that are important in this process thing. Social loafing, what it is, why it occurs, how to minimize it. Trust, what it is, why it's important, and how to build it. Team mental models, what they are, how to build them, how to make them more accurate and shared. Conflict management, bunch of stuff on that, and then how to make teams more resilient. Yeah, so be looking for those.